Okay, so today we are going to talk about some financial terms. We've played with TVM Solver. We've looked at some time value of money stuff. We have done some A equals P bracket 1 plus I to the N, which is, it's out. That's also time value of money, but not using payments. Today we're just going to cover some financial knowledge stuff that's worth knowing. So we're going to look at various financial terms and definitions, and yeah, so that's what we're going to look at today. So financial knowledge. Hope everyone is doing well, by the way. Summer is not far from us now. All right, so in terms of just some financial terms. So some terms. First one that we want to know about is principal. And we've talked about it before, but this is just going to be kind of an encompassing list. So principal is the lump sum of money. Okay, so in terms of, if it was a loan, it's going to be the amount borrowed. And if it was a investment, it is going to be how much money you put away. So it's the lump sum invested. And that kind of makes it sound as though it can only happen, if you put away one big chunk at once. If you put away money, every paycheck, so every 2 weeks or every month or every biweekly, whatever you get paid, the principal is the total amount of money that's in there. So that's what I mean by lump sum. Doesn't mean it has to go away all at once. It just means that it is the big kettle, the big pot of money. And it's the big pot of money, whether you've borrowed it or whether you have saved it. Okay, so that's what the principal is. And we've talked about this before again, but interest. So what is interest? Interest is basically the fee paid to use someone else's money. So in terms of if you have a loan, it's the fee to use the bank's money. Whereas if it's an investment, it's the bank pays you to use your money. Okay, so those are crucial. Those are key. Okay, so now let's talk about different financial vehicles that you will probably be involved with in your lifetime. Probably the single biggest financial transaction that most of you, not all, because some of you might have businesses and stuff, but the biggest financial transaction most of you will be involved with, and certainly the biggest one that I've ever had, is a mortgage. Okay, and so a mortgage is obviously that's what it's a loan when you're buying a piece of property, and there are some terms within mortgages. And so actually, I'm gonna extend this to be mortgage terms, and that's not even a great name for it, but mortgage terms. So we're going to talk about the stuff that when you're talking about mortgages, you need to know about. So one of the big ones that we need to know about is amortization. And I've talked about it before, but I never wrote down a definition. So amortization is the total length of time it will take to pay back all of the money borrowed. And I'm going to say a little asterisk here, if all goes according to plan. Okay, so that is you go and you borrow a big lump sum of money, and that lump sum of money is how much money you're going to borrow. And you say, well, according to the TVM solver work that I did, because I'm financially literate, I know that for the payments to be the size that I want them to be, I'm going to have to pay back this mortgage over 20 years. So 20 years would be what your amortization is. The thing is that you don't enter into a contract with a bank for that length of time. So amortization is the total length of time it will take to pay back all of the money that you have borrowed if all goes according to plan. So what kind of things could, not go according to plan? Well, for instance, you might need to borrow additional money um, to do a repair or a reno. Right. So often, you go and you get your mortgage and you lived in your house for, 4, 5, 10 years, and you're like, my mortgage is not yet paid off, but my family has expanded or my living circumstances have changed or whatever. And you decide that you're going to have to do something to your kitchen, let's say, as I'm looking in my kitchen, it's a disaster area right now. And you say, I'm going to have to borrow some extra money. So next time when you go to renegotiate your mortgage, and we'll get to that in a second, you might borrow more money. And so instead of increasing your payments, which you could do, you might just say, well, I know in theory I've only got 15 years left on my mortgage, but I'm going to borrow some extra money. So I'm going to have to extend how long it's going to take. So then you refinance your mortgage at, and you do it for another 20 years. Okay, so you can borrow additional money for a reno. And so that could be one thing, or maybe mortgage rates have changed. And so if mortgage rates change, what you might need to do then is change how long it's going to take you to pay off your mortgage, because you can only maybe afford a certain level of payment. And if mortgage rates go up, you're going to have to lengthen your loan because you can't pay it off as quickly as you need to. Right. So there's lots of different things that could change your plans, or often another really big one is that you move. Okay, so if you move, and change houses, right? So often people will buy, a small starter home or an inexpensive home and decide, this is good. And then after 5 or 10 years, again, their living circumstances have changed, their desires have changed. They flip a home and they go to a different place, and then obviously is going to cause the mortgage to change. Okay, so amortization is if everything goes according to plan, how long it takes to pay back the entire mortgage. Lovely. And then there is another one, and it's called the term length. So the term length. So amortization is, from start to finish, how long it takes you to pay back your mortgage, which in Canada, a lot of people go 25 years. Some people do 20 years. But you don't negotiate that length of loan with the bank. The bank is not comfortable with negotiating a loan for that long because they don't know what the financial markets are going to look like. And so even though 25 years is how long it's going to take you to pay the mortgage off, the term length is the length of your agreement with the bank. Okay, so I'm going to just do a really quick little diagram to kind of help show what's going on here. So if along the base here we had, hang on, get rid of that last piece there, time, okay, and over here we have the amount owed still, right? So, you go out and you borrow your whatever. Oh, I didn't change the color. So, you go out and you borrow 300,000, let's say, and you start paying it off. It doesn't, it's interesting. Mortgage, when you pay off a mortgage, it doesn't look like this, right? That's not what happens, because when you first have your mortgage, your first payment most of your first payment is going to be interest because you are paying, interest for the full $300,000. So your first payment doesn't actually pay all that much off your mortgage. Your first payment is mostly interest. So what's interesting is that, and I'm not going to do a great job of drawing this, but the amount that you owe versus time goes like this. And what happens is that, it's not supposed to be flat there. It's supposed to be a little bit sloped. What happens is that at first you're paying, more interest than anything else, but as time goes by, you're paying more and more principal, which is the money that you actually owe off of your mortgage. So it goes like this. Okay, so it might be that on a standard, let's say that this is a 25-year mortgage, 25 years amortization. So out here, this is our 25-year mark. That's where, if all goes according to plan, I'm going to owe $0. So, 0 to 25 years, that's what it kind of looks like. But thing is that you don't negotiate with the bank for that length of time. Normally, most people negotiate in 5-year chunks. So, there's 5 years, there's 10 years, there's 15 years, and there's 20 years. They didn't do a great job of making that linear. Nevertheless, so you might, at your first mortgage, you borrow $300,000. After 5 years, you might still owe like $285,000 because you paid a buttload of interest. And so it's only this chunk of time that the bank is willing to deal to kind of say, yep, we will lend you the money for 5 years. And they know that the mortgage isn't going to be paid off after 5 years. So what happens is that you have to, at this juncture right here, you're going to have to renegotiate with your bank. Okay, renegotiate. So, you get your mortgage for 5 years, and that's not always what it is. It can be different, and we'll talk about that. But you set up your loan with the bank, and then they know at the end of 5 years, you're going to have to reevaluate. And so they'll check things over. They'll see what your employment history looks like. They'll see what the prevailing interest rates are, and you will set up another loan. In a lot of cases, you don't even go with the same bank because it's in your interest to shop around to different banks to get the very best rate. So, you're going to renegotiate there, and then you're going to have to renegotiate here. So now this one, you paid off more. So this time you only paid off 15,000 in that chunk. Maybe over here you do 25,000 and you get down to 260,000. And then you get another 5-year mortgage, 5-year term, right? So each one of these things, this is a term because that's how long your negotiation with the bank is, and this is a term. And so, after this one, that's a nice straight line there, Mr. Galbraith. You did better. This time you paid off $60,000, and that makes sense because you're paying less interest and more principal with each one of your payments. And so then, this is going to be a term. So we renegotiate there, and we would then renegotiate here. And maybe we did really, really well, and we got it all the way down to 100,000 or 120,000, let's say. And then the final one, so there's a term, and there's a term. And this one, yeah, we actually finally get it all paid off. So the term is how long the bank is willing to do business with you for. So it's the length of your agreement with the bank. And frequently, probably the most common, it is 5 years. But it doesn't have to be. Some people can be as short as 1 year. 2-year terms are becoming more and more popular. So it can be, 2. I'm sure you could do 3, 4. You see 2, 4, and 5 a lot. Sometimes you do 7. But what often happens is that the interest rate is usually the longer your term. So I'm going to say this normally. It's not there's virtually no hard and fast rules when it comes to the world of finance, but usually the longer your term, the higher the interest rate. Okay, and that's because the bank doesn't know how much the money is going to cost them in the future. So if you go out right now and let's say that you could find a 2-year term, so the 2-year term here, they might advertise that at 2.5% per annum. And then the 4-year term, it might be 2.6% per annum. And the 5-year term, it would be probably like 2.65% per annum. And then the seven is usually you pay a pretty decent premium for that. So it might be like 2.9 or maybe even 3%. And the reason is because, you know, the money that the bank lends you for your mortgage is not really the bank's money. It's other people's money who have made investments. And so the bank has to pay, doesn't have to, but the bank usually pays them some interest. So if the bank is paying, the people 1% interest for their money, that means that the bank gets to make 1.5% interest. That's the difference between those. And so the bank has a pretty good idea of what interest rates are going to look like in the shorter term. Like if you said, what's the temperature going to be tomorrow? You'd have better confidence of that than what would the temperature be in a week's time. And so that's why banks are usually willing to offer lower rates for a shorter term because they kind of have a decent idea of what interest rates are going to be. But the farther out you go, the less confidence the bank has that they know exactly what the interest rates are going to be. And so to kind of build in some wiggle room there, they're like, well, we're going to increase the interest rate. Okay. But the advantage to having a longer term is that you can make better plans. You know what your payment is going to be for 7 years if you negotiate for 7 years. Whereas if you only negotiate for 2 years, you might get a little bit better deal in the short term. But if interest rates do go up, well, then when you renew at the 2-year mark, maybe instead of being 2.5%, maybe interest rates have gone up and they're now 3.5%. So you saved money for the first 2 years, but for the years after that, you would have been much better off having gone with the 7-year term. So, it's a bit of a gamble that's going on here. So that's kind of how interest rates are going to look when we're talking about term length. So frequently, it's probably the most common is 5-year, although 4 is getting prominent as well. I always go for 5-year because I think it's the best bang for buck, but that's just for me. So term length is how long that you enter into a contract with the bank for. It doesn't mean that your mortgage will be paid off. You will have to most times renegotiate at the end. Okay, so we've got that amortization is the total length of your mortgage from start to finish, right? And then, so on this diagram, this whole chunk right there from start to finish, that would be the amortization, right? Because that's how long it took from start to finish to fully pay off the mortgage. Each of these chunks that you enter into an agreement with the bank for, those are called your term lengths, okay? Now, when it comes to getting a mortgage, you obviously have to pay an interest rate, okay? And so there are, again, the longer that financial institutions are around, the more different options and the more confusing it becomes. But in the grand scheme, there are 2 different types of mortgages that you can get. You can get something that is called a fixed rate mortgage, okay? And a fixed rate mortgage is when you enter into your term with the bank. So for the duration, meaning the whole time of your term, the interest rate paid is the same initially negotiated rate. Okay, so a fixed rate mortgage is, you go into the bank, you say, I want to borrow $250,000 and I want to have a 20-year more amortization and I'm going to have a term length of 5 years. Okay, sorry about this, folks. I got to go answer a phone.